Mount St. Helens is primarily an explosive dacite volcano with a complex magmatic system. The volcano was formed during 4 eruptive stages beginning about 275,000 years ago and has been the most active volcano in the Cascade Range during the Holocene. Prior to about 12,800 years ago, tephra, lava domes, and pyroclastic flows were erupted, forming the older St. Helens edifice, but a few lava flows extended beyond the base of the volcano. The bulk of the modern edifice, above the 1980 crater floor, was constructed during the last 3,000 years, when the volcano erupted a wide variety of products from summit and flank vents. Historical eruptions in the 19th century originated from the Goat Rocks area on the north flank, and were witnessed by early settlers. At 8:32 Sunday morning, May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted, shaken by an earthquake measuring the Richter scale. The north face of this tall symmetrical mountain collapsed in a massive rock debris avalanche. In a few moments, this slab of rock and ice slammed into Spirit Lake, crossed a ridge 1,300 feet high, and roared 14 miles down the Toutle River. The avalanche rapidly released pressurized gases within the volcano. A tremendous lateral explosion ripped through the avalanche and developed into a turbulent, stone-filled wind that swept over ridges and toppled trees, and nearly 150 square miles of forest was blown over or left dead and standing. Wet, cement-like slurries of rock and mud scoured all sides of the volcano, and searing flows of pumice poured from the crater. The eruption lasted 9 hours, but Mount St. Helens and the surrounding landscape were dramatically changed within moments. A vast, gray landscape lay where once the forested slopes of Mount St. Helens grew, and in 1982 the President and Congress created the 110,000-acre National Volcanic Monument for research, recreation, and education. An explosive steam eruption on March 27, 1980, was followed by alternating periods of quiescence and minor eruption. Pressure from rising magma within the volcano caused extensive fissures and the growth of a bulge on the north flank of the peak. On the morning of May 18, an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.1 on the Richter scale triggered a gigantic landslide on the mountain's north face. The north slope fell away in an avalanche that was followed and overtaken by a lateral air blast, which carried a high-velocity cloud of superheated ash and stone outward. Some 15 miles from the volcano's summit, the blast reached temperatures of 660 degrees Fahrenheit and speeds of at least 300 miles per hour. The avalanche and lateral blast were followed by mudflows, pyroclastic flows, and floods that buried the river valleys around Mount St. Helens in deep layers of mud and debris as far as 17 miles away. Meanwhile, simultaneously with the blast, a vertical eruption of gas and ash formed a column some 16 miles high that produced ash falls as far east as central Montana. Complete darkness occurred in Spokane, Washington, about 250 miles northeast of the volcano. A total of 57 people and thousands of animals were killed in the May 18 event, and trees over an area of some 200 square miles were blown down by the lateral air blast. At the event's end, Mount St. Helens's volcanic cone had been completely blasted away. In place of its 9,677-foot peak was a horseshoe-shaped crater with a rim reaching an elevation of 8,363 feet. Further eruptions occurred until 1986, and a dome of lava grew intermittently in the crater. On the morning of May 18, Mount St. Helens was shaken by an earthquake of about 5 magnitude, and the entire north side of the summit began to slide down the mountain. The giant landslide of rock and ice, one of the largest recorded in history, was followed and overtaken by an enormous explosion of steam and volcanic gases, which surged northward along the ground at high speed. The lateral blast stripped trees from most hill slopes within 6 miles of the volcano and leveled nearly all vegetation for as far as 12 miles away, and approximately 10 million trees were felled by the blast. The landslide debris, liquefied by the violent explosion, surged down the mountain at speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. The avalanche flooded Spirit Lake and roared down the valley of the Toutle River for a distance of 13 miles, burying the river to an average depth of 150 feet. Mud flows, pyroclastic flows, and floods added to the destruction, destroying roads, bridges, parks, and thousands more acres of forest. Simultaneous with the avalanche, a vertical eruption of gas and ash formed a mushrooming column over the volcano more than 12 miles high. Ash from the eruption fell on northwest cities and towns like snow and drifted around the globe for 2 weeks. 57 people, thousands of animals, and millions of fish were killed by the eruption of Mount St. Helens. By late in the afternoon of May 18, the eruption subsided, and by early the next day it had essentially ceased. Mount St. Helens volcanic cone was completely blasted away and replaced by a horseshoe-shaped crater. The mountain lost 1,700 feet from the eruption. Volcanic eruptions can also result in secondary damage, beyond the direct loss to life and property from the eruption itself. Volcanic ash can cause respiratory illnesses such as silicosis and can be particularly harmful to infants and people with chronic lung diseases. Gases such as hydrogen chloride, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen fluoride can cause both short and long-term problems. Eruptions can cause economic harm that affects workers' livelihoods and can force mass migrations of people in affected regions. The 2010 eruption of Iceland also demonstrated the threat posed to jet aircraft by high clouds of volcanic ash. This eruption led aviation authorities to ground flights across northern and central Europe for several days.